This is Church Branding 101, what every ministry should know.
You're about to learn the difference between brand and branding.
We'll share exercises you can copy to establish your church's brand principles.
And we'll confront the big question, does branding even belong in the church?
Let's dive in. Well, hey there and welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I am Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. We call him Bishop Branding. It's Alexander Mills.
Hello, hello.
What we're discussing today is actually a small excerpt from the logo and branding module from Pro Church Certified, our online certificate program for creative ministry.
You get a real certificate at the end.
You absolutely do.
And guess what color it is? It's not white.
Oh, TBD. Well, I guess it was revealed on the sign-up page.
It's black.
It's dark mode. We put the certificate in dark mode. There are 9 modules that make up Certified overall. So we started with photography, just recently published videography, and then the third module of 9 is logo and branding. I'm putting the finishing touches on that right now. Our inaugural class is made up of more than 300 students. You can learn more about Certified at prochurchcertified.com. Registration for the class of 2026 opens in the new year. There's a waiting list there. What's cool about the logo and branding module specifically is that the task, because each module ends with an exercise, the task is we're creating these brand guides for churches from scratch. And so each lesson is dedicated to a different part of the brand guide. And so we have one dedicated to logo and typography and colors and voice and personality, all of that. But it starts with the foundations. And that's what we're going to be covering in this episode. What I should also say is if you want me and my team to work directly on your church's branding, that is something that we do as well. But it is very limited. We don't have an official product for it. If you want to work directly with our design team, shoot an email to hello@prochurchtools.com and we can talk more. We've got 5?
Yeah.
5 kind of big brand ideas. And we're going to start with this one. And that is the simplest way to understand branding is this. The other day, I sit down next to my wife and I have a TikTok to share with her. Who can't relate? A reel to share with your significant other. And the title of the reel was like, these are the best donuts in Niagara. And we live in Niagara region of Canada. And so this specific creator is dedicated to unearthing the best food and drink spots in the area.
Love it.
And so they're showing this establishment. And they go inside, they show you the outdoors, they show you all the donuts. And like as the video is playing, my wife kind of interrupts and goes, wow, I wouldn't expect great donuts to come from that shop.
Is it Country Fresh Donuts over on Victoria Avenue?
It is not. It is not. It's called Cookies and More.
Yes.
So
That's over by our house, the Italian spot.
the Italian spot.
Yes.
And you know it's the Italian spot because the marquee is just the Italian flag.
In the most, if a font could be Italian, it's Italian font.
And you'd only know what the font is if you were standing right in front of it because the contrast, this sign, this marquee in no way suggests or implies premium pastries for what the sensibility of the mid-30s millennial person is looking for. You go inside and it looks like a kitchen of a restaurant. It's like
from the backside.
Yes, right. Like it is industrial, but not think like designed industrial. Like it is literally, this is like the kitchen of a bakery behind the counter.
And the industrial complex it's in looked like it had been like condemned, and then recently this little bake shop opened up and it's taken Niagara by storm because everyone I hear, we haven't bought from there yet, but everyone I hear is like, oh, they have the best things there. But what you're saying is true. If you were to look at it as someone with, like you said, a millennial, someone with an affinity for a vibe, for lack of a better term, it might not be your first choice.
Right. And this kind of gets us into big idea number 2, which is the difference between brand and branding, because they are not the same thing.
Right.
So brand is defined like this: a person's gut feeling about your church.
Yep.
Or in the case of a premium pastries establishment, the gut feeling you get about this place. So this has nothing to do with the actual substance of the organization, the quality per se of what they're serving.
Yeah.
It's just like you look for nonverbal cues and then you get this kind of gut feeling, like, this is what I would expect. And we're all doing this. Branding then is the actual practice of perception design that is being continually done by the organization or by your church.
Done. That's imperative. Yeah.
That's the thing. And that's the reason I say the practice of perception design, because it's not like, hey, we made this style guide, this is our logo, this is our colors, this is our font. Like we have now completed branding.
Yes.
Branding is this thing that is never ending. And what it ultimately does is it shapes brand. Branding is what you do. ultimately it shapes brand.
Yes.
Because it was the design choices that Cookies and More made on their marquee, on their sign, where they decided, no, we're not going to care about contrast. We don't care about legibility. We don't care about readability.
Who cares about the red, white, and green?
We are only focused on attracting the Italians in the
Yes.
area. And this isn't to say that I would not expect premium pastries to come from the Italians.
Right.
It's to say this graphic design is sloppy. My expectation is that
Yep.
what you do behind the counter would also be sloppy. Now, is that fair? But maybe not. This isn't about what's fair. It's about what's actually happening. And we are all reading nonverbal cues and giving out nonverbal cues. It's happening all the time.
And that's true about church too.
This gets to the third big idea. All churches perception design, but most are doing it unintentionally. So we're going to do a little example here, okay? We're going to start with Church A. I'm going to describe Church A. I will then proceed to describe Church B.
Okay.
I will then have 2 questions for you, and by extension, the listeners, the viewers. Church A. They meet in a church building with stained glass windows. Their pastor dresses in a suit and tie, and their sanctuary is seated with pews. It's Church A. Church B. They meet in a rented middle school. Their pastor dresses casually, and their worship center, that's right, they call it a worship center, not a sanctuary at this church.
Sure, they don't call it the auditorium.
I had to go with one or the other. I just was like, is a church that meets in a middle school going to call their area where worship takes place an auditorium? Like, it might not be big enough to be an auditorium.
Yeah.
So when it's not big enough to be labeled an odd,
What they don't call it is the sanctuary.
correct. And it's seated with chairs.
Yes.
So now my 2 questions for you. Which of these churches has the older congregation, and which of these churches is non-denominational?
Yeah, I mean, from the pictures that you paint, right? And this is the point we're trying to get. From the pictures you paint of these 2 congregations, you get to make an informed assumption, which is that the Church A is probably the older congregation, maybe mainline, and Church B is surely non-denominational because their pastor is wearing baggy jeans and maybe a crop top.
So again, so those are some insinuations you're making that were not at all expressly described.
The worship center. They won't call it a sanctuary. Yeah.
Pastor dresses casually. Alex reads crop top.
Hey, I see some crazy things on Instagram Reels nowadays in the church sphere.
What's curious is that all 6 of the characteristics that I mentioned are strictly design or style related.
Right.
So stained glass window.
Yeah.
Pastor's clothing. The design of the worship center sanctuary odd.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with age, nothing to do with bent of theology. And this is kind of the point that I'm trying to make, because I think this is one of the ideas that more churches are resistant to in the realm of creative ministry than other things. We hear the idea of like the practice of perception design, and it's like, I kind of like cringe at that description. I don't like that at all. That couldn't be me. I don't think I could get there. And yet, when I lay out something like this, it is so indisputably clear to all of us which has the church that has the older congregation and which would be non-denominational. And that's because we are all practicing perception design at all times. Most of us are just doing it unintentionally. And I think women tend to get this easier than men. I think from a younger age, women understand the clothing that I wear communicates something.
Okay.
So you see this in like younger girls. My daughter is 10 years old. I did not need a daughter to notice this, but I see it in her. She's like, oh, I'm going to wear this because that's what my friends wear. So that suggests like I am on trend. And that suggests something about me that then puts me into a group that I want. Now, interestingly, men do this just as much. It's just not a conscious thought for most of us. Like, I'll meet with a pastor, and let's say they're like, in their mid-30s, 38-year-old pastor. And we meet for lunch, we meet for dinner, whatever it is. And I notice as like they come in to shake my hand and we're sharing a meal, like, wow.
He's got a crop top on. Sorry.
Oh boy.
Wow.
You're the one derailing the episode today. Comes in, skinny jeans, which is like a pretty bold fashion choice for a 38-year-old father to make.
Yeah.
And like, I'm pretty certain if I pressed this guy on this, like, why are you wearing, like, that's a bold choice in denim. Like, why are you making this choice? I don't know. Like, I just did. You press him a bit more, it would eventually come down to, I think, like, I don't know, like, this is how guys my age dress. Okay, great. Like, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
You are describing perception design because the last thing that you want is to wear something that would make a statement. You want to blend in. You want to be like one of the guys. This is how people my age dress. And there's a cringy millennial statement that I do think is very memorable, and so I think is perfectly apt here, which is your vibe attracts your tribe. That is the practice of perception design. It's the same reason why I can describe Church A and Church B, and we can confidently say that this one is non-denominational and this has the older congregation, because we are all picking up on these nonverbal cues. So then that gets to the question of, if these are things that we're practicing unintentionally, should we be practicing them intentionally?
Right. Like, is it manipulative?
Right. Do we get to the point where if we are conscious about it, now we're getting into the realm of manipulation? And this is big idea number 4. Because I can also imagine having a conversation with a pastor listening right now, and they're saying like, sure, it's one thing if this is who I am, and yeah, I get it. I'm convinced I'm communicating certain things in nonverbal ways. The language that I use, the way that I dress, the way that our sanctuary is designed, the logo choice, the color. Yes, all these things are communicating something. But like, I don't want to actually think about this consciously, because if it happens by accident, great. If it happens by choice, now I'm getting into the realm of manipulation. I don't want to like shape something. I just want it to be what it is. This is my belief. If your church neglects this, we can get into some trouble, because I think that it is your church's responsibility to work actively on perception design, because it is the only way to honestly present yourself to the world. If you don't work on it actively, this is the truth. You'll still be working on it. You're just not going to be giving it your full effort. If you've listened to this episode, the glass has been broken. You're now aware that this exists. You can't pretend that you're not.
Yeah.
And the result will be this. You leave the door open for people and your community at large to believe things about your church and the church that are not true.
Yeah.
None of this is being done for the purpose of vanity. This is being done for the purpose of fulfillment of mission. If the way that you present yourself to the world is causing these hurdles or causing these rifts to exist between you and your audience, then what that means is you're purposely making it more difficult for people to get connected to church.
Right.
And that's, I think, what we want to avoid. So this gets us into big idea number 5, which is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. Your church's branding foundation. Because I just said, this is all about mission. It's all about vision. We talk about that all the time, right? Like, how many episodes, and you want to make a decision based in your values. Yeah. How about we actually go through an exercise to establish these things?
All right.
Because I think maybe most churches do this, but if you told me, 'cause I'm open to being wrong about this, yeah, I understand it's an esoteric thing, but I don't know if my church actually has those things written down. And now we're, of course, introducing conflict into interdepartmental decisions, because there's no actual compass or legend for making those said decisions. These extend beyond creative ministry. We all know this. So let's talk about purpose, mission, vision, and values.
All right.
We've actually got beyond branding now. This is like the foundation for the church. But you can't do branding without these things.
Right.
Any episode, I believe this is episode 840 of the Pro Church Tool Show. Anything we've ever talked about becomes a lot more difficult if you don't have these 4 things. So what is each? We got to define what each is. Is there a distinction between mission and vision? Purpose is why we exist. And we're going to get to real examples for each. Purpose is why we exist. Mission is what we do. Vision is where we're going. And values is how we behave. So let's get to examples of each. I've been talking for a long time. Anything you need to interject?
No, it's all good. At this point, I hope it's abundantly clear that branding transcends design. Sometimes,
yes.
Sometimes when we think about branding or brand, and you've done a great job already of making a delineation between the two. What is a brand and what is branding? Brand is kind of a feeling, and branding is basically how you evoke that feeling. But branding transcends design. The module in Pro Church Certified, handles a lot of design. It's design heavy, but this conversation transcends that, because we've made mention already about stained glass windows, about the language we use to talk about our building, about what we wear. And so we mentioned on last week's show that phrase, what goes unnamed goes unnoticed. For us here, just to unearth that and you use the phrase to break the glass, okay, we're all telling a story, whether implicitly or explicitly. We're all crafting, curating a brand of not just our church, but you said it again, the church. And so just to become aware of that, understand that it involves design, but it transcends design. And now, as we're going to get into it, it ought to be linked to our mission, our vision, our values. I hope that can help to maybe build some bridges between this conversation and somebody, whether it's a pastor or a volunteer, who has been in the past resistant or hesitant to engage in like actively in perception design. It's like, oh, okay, I see how this matters and how we can get there. So I'm shocked you're giving this one away for free on the show and not just keeping it for certified, but I'm glad for all the churches that are listening to the show and are going to get the real meat right now when we talk about purpose, mission, vision, and values.
I think maybe as we're discussing this, one more thing that comes to mind is millennials and then Gen Z behind us and surely Gen Alpha behind are a lot more aware of this type of thing than I think previous generations are. A lot more into design, a lot more as it extends to all things, a lot more into creativity. And so this language is actually something that's becoming more fluent. What that means is the repercussions of ignoring it become greater. Perhaps in previous eras where this wasn't as top of mind, it wasn't a language that was as frequently spoken by an age group, by a demo. Yeah, maybe you ignore it and it's less of a big deal. And so if you are a little bit older listening to this, if it sounds a bit foreign, perhaps that's because it does come a lot more naturally to younger generations.
Yeah, to digital natives, right? We talk, it's the ethos of the show, helping churches navigate the biggest communication shift in the last 500 years. And what's changed is the advent of the internet and certainly these little supercomputers we have in our pockets. And, you know, when I was in high school, I was part of a small group of people who belonged to this. It was called a specialist high skills major program. It was for videography. So there's just a small group of us that like knew how to edit videos. No one else in the school knew how to edit videos. And now you fast forward, 20 years and I've got my niece and nephew, they're 15 and 14. And not only do they know and all their friends know how to edit videos, in some cases better than I do, on their phones, but they know what aesthetic to employ, what design elements to employ, what aesthetic choices to make to cut through online, to succeed. And so they have this design acumen that previous generations have never needed to have in that sense, but now they all have to have it if they're online. So certainly for digital natives, you and I are just on the border of being digital natives because you and I do remember a world before the smartphone. But Gen Z and certainly Gen Alpha do not and will not. They won't. Aside from, like Luddite families who don't give their kids phones, but they know that they're out there. Those are true digital natives. And I've noticed that they have this sense of design out of necessity because they're making creative choices online every day that even you and I didn't have to make until recently.
Right, yeah, that design acumen. Yeah, so my wife sees Cookies and More and she goes, oh, the design acumen here is like, sloppy, like interior design, sloppy, graphic design, sloppy, like building design, sloppy. And now you're telling me their donuts are like the best ever?
Yeah.
Like that seems incongruent. And that is the evaluation process that they go through. And then people even younger than us, I think that's a great example of and I was in that same boat as you in high school. Like I was like the guy that did video.
Yeah.
The only reason I'm here is because when I learned video, the entire city of Edmonton and all the churches were like, hey, that guy does video, help us.
Yes.
Like that wouldn't exist in 2020.
Yeah.
They'd be like, hey bro, we all can do this now.
Yes, yeah.
So how do we actually take these ideas and make them actionable? Rooted in purpose, mission, vision, and value. So what I did was I wrote down some examples of what each could be for a hypothetical church. So let's start with purpose, which again
is why we exist.
Why we exist. We exist to glorify God by connecting people to Jesus Christ, fostering spiritual growth, and serving our community with love and compassion. As you'll see with the first three, they're kind of stock for what you would expect a church to say.
Sure, like any headline on a church's website?
Yes. Well, hopefully not a headline, and we'll get to that in a bit. So that's purpose. Mission, which is what we do. Our mission is to create a welcoming environment where individuals can encounter God, grow in their faith, and engage in meaningful relationships. Through worship, discipleship, outreach, and service, we strive to reflect Christ's love to our city and beyond. So that's mission. Vision is where we're going. So here's the example. We envision our church as a vibrant, Christ-centered community where people from all ages and walks of life find hope, belonging, and purpose. Our goal is to be a hub of spiritual renewal, community transformation, and global impact through the power of the gospel. Now for me, the purpose, mission, and vision. The difference between Alex's church and my church and your church, those three are all going to be very, very similar because we are all churches, which means our biblical mandate, which is what expresses and motivates mission, vision, and purpose, is going to be all very similar. Like, if I share this to Alex, be like, Alex, do you want to be a hub of spiritual renewal?
Right.
Check. Community transformation? Check.
Yeah.
Global impact through the power of the gospel?
Love it.
Check. Otherwise, you're basically being like, Great Commission? Never heard of it. So, like, how do we go through this practice and be like, how does this help at all? Because once we've established those three, it's the values that become personal to your church. So the way that I like to do this, we've gone through purpose, mission, vision, now we do values, is that I like to have 3 values, each short and memorable.
Okay.
Here's the thing about purpose, mission, and vision. Those are going to be understood by the senior leadership of the church. Maybe not like memorized, but very well committed to memory, the broad ideas of purpose, mission, and vision, okay? Alex, pastor at his church. He is responsible for knowing those things. Let's say I serve at Alex's church. I'm just a volunteer. Those 3 things are not going to be top of mind for me.
Right.
I am not responsible for those. What I'll be responsible for is understanding the values of the church. And the only way for the values to be understood and committed to memory, not just by those that volunteer, but from those that attend church, because your values should be said from stage again and again and again 1,000 times until everybody knows these are our values. That is how you build culture. So senior leadership basically has the edict from scripture on what we are as a church. Our organization, our institution, our reason for existence is this. And then it's how do we do it?
Yeah.
And how Alex's church does it will be different from how my church does it, which
totally.
will be different from how your church does it. And that's the entire point. Because Alex's DNA and personality and that of the rest of the leadership of his church will be distinct from mine, will be distinct from yours. And that is a good thing. What would not be good if Alex had said, community renewal, get it out of here. We don't care about it. Okay, that's probably an incomplete expression of what scripture calls the church to be. So how do we actually create values? I like 3 of them. I like them to be 2 words each. They need to be short and memorable, and each one needs to begin with a verb. It's a lot of parameters.
Okay.
So let's
But
get
not all the same letter. You're leaving alliteration out.
Look, I mean, at a certain point, there's too many constraints. So let's talk about some real examples of this. And I guess one more parameter. Values are dictating how you behave.
Yes.
Not what you do, but more how you do it. So this comes from Kensington Church. They shared their brand guide with me and were open to me sharing this with them, sharing this with all of you. There are 3 values. Show up, jump in, move out.
How are you going to forget that?
And you can say that again and again.
Yeah.
Next one, this is from Harvest Church. Lift up, hold high, love well.
Good stuff.
And then this one from Christ Our Refuge. Know Christ, love people, serve our city. Psych. That was a trick. Let's look at it again, okay? Know Christ, love people, serve our city. 3 punchy statements, okay? Check. Each one starts with a verb. Easy to remember. Must be values. No. And it's really important that we understand the distinction between these 2 because know Christ, love people, serve our city. What is that? That's actually mission. That's what we do. Jump in, move out, show up. That's how we do it.
Right.
And the values, they exist because they define how we behave. One more critical point on this. And if you're a little bit like, oh, this is kind of hard to track. Like, this is a little bit messy. It's kind of the point. Like the purpose, mission, and vision, it's kind of like you establish it once and you don't really need to like talk about it all the time. It's the values that you talk about again and again and again. You just want to get the values right the first time. Otherwise, they're going to be so intertwined with something like purpose, mission, or vision that it will become so complex and conflated that you won't be able to use values emphatically. And that's how we're going to kind of close this out. Values, once they are established, should be the anchor for everything that your church does. So I kind of did this hypothetically for a church that I would want to lead. Okay, so if Brady's leading a church, what are the 3 values? Because I would have the same purpose, mission, and vision. Yes, I care about the 3. Okay,
great.
Great Commission.
Great.
Yeah,
Not a heretic.
I'm on board.
Yeah.
My values. Number 1 would be believe big. Number 2 would be stick around. And number 3 would be make moments. Those would be my 3 churches' values.
I mean, you got me.
And they are expressions of who I am as a person. They're in fact actually all related to the actual values that I had at this organization. Because while I don't lead a church, I do lead this organization of many dozens. So believe big is just the church version of calculated delusion, which is like, yeah, we want to accomplish great things. And a lot of the times we're going to come to the drawing board and we're going to look at budget and we're going to look at the realities of our church, and we're going to look at what's available to us. We're going to look at what's working against us, and it would be really easy to say, unlikely. But we need to come to the table and say, hey, we have to believe in possibility. We have to believe that like we can make this happen. It doesn't matter what our constraints are. It's our belief that needs to be the constant, and then we'll work with whatever's in front of us.
Yeah.
Believe big. Stick around. That is my undying, unwavering commitment to longevity. Longevity in relationships, longevity in service. And so if we're going to be a church, hey, we're going to stick around. That's what we do at this church. And then finally, make moments. As someone that is so committed to process and like doing the right little things every day, what I have found so strange in my life is like a few brief moments that have forever altered the trajectory of where I'm going.
Yeah.
As someone that's like, compound this, compound that, little bit. And then like there's a moment with Jesus and nothing is ever the same in the best ways. And so I care about things like in my own life, like pageantry and like making moments and like these big things and ceremony, because I believe when you make a moment, it can become a memory. And then that memory becomes something that affects you in the future when you look back. But in the moment, it can also like change the direction that you're going.
Yeah.
And so like those are all unique to me and they mean something to me. So let's say I established all those in my hypothetical church. Believe big, stick around, make moments. Now, when we get into something like logo design, we get into something like color, we get into something like typography, I'm going to make sure that every choice we make is in some way anchored to one of those values. So if we were going to, let's say, design a logo, maybe I could anchor that logo to the value of stick around. Okay, we care about being rooted in this city. What is something in this city that is a constant? And I'd actually like worked through this as a hypothetical church in the whole certified module. I actually created the whole fake church. It was a whole big thing.
What was it called?
I can't tell you. Oh. But what I will tell you is where...
It's behind the paywall.
That's behind the paywall. So I'm trying to figure out like how much to it. What I will tell you is this church was located in Palm Springs, this hypothetical church. And I'd spent some time in Palm Springs. And what I'd done was I had taken some photos of the landscape. And there's this certain... You're going to love this. You're going to love this. There's a certain species of palm that is native to Palm Springs.
I'm all the way in.
And that
my house is the for sale sign's up. I'm moving.
It's the California fan palm tree.
Okay.
It is the only...
Is that the ridiculous one that Brittany posted a picture of where like underneath the green palms was like this big mass of like, it was a
like
dead
a skirt.
palms?
Yeah. And that's how they trim it. Yeah, exactly. So interestingly, that's actually the only palm species native to the Western United States. The only one.
All the rest are foreign imports.
That's the one. So what I did was I took a photo of that and then I extracted colors from it. And we're actually going to do an entire YouTube video on color extraction from photography.
Cool.
And then that color palette became the palette for the church.
It's so good.
So it's like our value is stick around. The color palette for our church's branding came from the only palm tree that is native to this region. In a transient area where people have retirement homes, they come and go. It's one of those places where like you grow up and then you leave. Yeah. But not us. We're a church that sticks around. That's a value. Now you can see it in color. Yeah. Chills.
No, it's so good. We recently did that with our brand mark. So I had been pondering for years about the rural nature of our church. We're a very rural church, and that presents certain blessings and certain woes. And I've been wrestling through the woes lately. And I was doing a brand mark redesign, and I was like, oh, and our church practice, our worship practice is centered around the communion table. We meet at communion every week. The image of the bread and the blood is just central to our worship. And so our brand mark is like this riff on a head of wheat now, because it identifies us as a rural, where we are, planted, rooted. Again, another agrarian metaphor, but like, there are farmers who belong to our community. There are wheat fields all around. We have a field in our backyard. It's like, this is what our geography looks like. And then as far as the center of our worship, well, it's the bread and blood. And so that's in the center of the brand mark. So how this works out is because when it comes to churches and intentionally engaging in perception design, one of the hesitancies that I hear is like, or even one of the errors I see churches make is they lean so hard into perception design that they portray something about themselves that is untrue because they know that people are looking. They want people to come to church, which is good, right? And so you end up kind of presenting this facade, especially online. And then when people come and show up and we're like, hold on, like this is not what your website looks like, or this is not what your Instagram account looks like, so I'm feeling a little disoriented. When you back that up a few steps and start from values, first of all, when you're repeating these values from stage, it's in your language, your community begins to take shape under that culture. So your community your culture begins to form to those values. And then when you make design choices, whether it's on your website or your brand mark or your Instagram account from those values, then when somebody sees that and it attracts them, they come to your space and your community's been shaped in this culture. And now all of a sudden it's congruent. It's true because you started from a place of values, not from like, oh, what's something cool we can do with our brand mark this year.
And that's the word, you said it. It's congruency. And how many times have we mentioned that on the show? Like, here's how to actually express that.
Yeah.
We just talked about doing it in visual branding. But once those values are established, and because you're saying them from stage so many times, because you're repeating them to your team so many times, everybody knows them. And then that becomes the way that we behave. And we all understand why we do it. And nobody gets like upset when somebody like suggests that we stick to the values because like, yeah, that's who we are. That's how we behave. Now you're building culture.
Yep.
And so you can see how this isn't just about branding, but how you can't really do branding without it. And when you work backwards, now you have a very, very strong foundation so that let's say I'm the lead pastor of this hypothetical church and I'm saying to my worship team, like, hey, I know like you're really like tired and you've given everything at the end of a Sunday. But hey, I really want to encourage you, stick around. You know, that's all right. Stick around in the lobby and go make a moment with someone. Just focus every week. I'm going to make one moment with somebody because that will mean something to them. And that is how we like build something special here week after week. And I'm not just like coming up with something random, but I'm saying this is who we are. It's who we're always going to be. And that's because it has been informed by the uniqueness of our church, where we're located, the leadership, and the biblical mandate all coming together into something special. Just as a recap, we talked about the simplest way to understand branding. We talked about brand versus branding. Brand being a person's gut feeling about your church. Branding being the practice of perception design. We talked about all churches being in the habit of practicing perception design, perhaps just not knowing they're doing it intentionally. We then tackled, okay, if we do start doing it intentionally, is it manipulative? No. In fact, it's the most important thing that you can do to ensure that your church is perceived in an honest way by your community and people that are evaluating your church or people that aren't evaluating your church but are just seeing it from afar and the global church and the role that you play in that. And then we talked about your church's branding foundation, which is purpose, mission, vision, values, purpose, why we exist, mission, what we do, vision, where we're going, and values, how we behave. Purpose, mission, and vision, it's the same for Alex's church, for my church, for your church. Values, that's where we get to have some fun. And you take your DNA and express it in unique ways. How do you want to bring heaven to earth in ways that only your church can? And then use those three values to establish culture and do something really, really special in the world. You know what's really, really special? Having you as a listener, having you as a host. Wow. We'll talk to you next Wednesday.
All right. All right. Oh, hey there. Welcome to the show.